Welcome to the web of conspiracy. Here is your host, Adam Webb.
Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It's great to be back with you again this week. Pretty good show lined up for you this week. A little different, I think, in some respects, but nonetheless, I think that there's a lot to be gathered from this show in terms of the future and some questions that we're going to have to ask ourselves. So, before I get into that, just a few announcements. I wanted to once again thank everybody who continues to listen and support the show. Um, it amazes me, and I'm really grateful for it. And once again, thanks to everybody who has stuck around, continues to listen to the show, as well as welcome to all the new listeners because it really is surprising me. So nonetheless, thank you once again to everybody who continues to support the show. Um, uh, One other thing here, real quick, before I move into um, some of the topics for the topic for today. I wanted to touch base on last week's episode, the Bermuda Triangle and the vial vortices. Now, I've had a couple people question if, in fact, what I said was true with regards to uh, whether or not I had actually recorded an episode before. I had actually originally had recorded an episode at the end of February. That episode was recorded at the end of February. So I recorded about a week and a half or so before the Malaysian flight had disappeared. So call it what you will. I don't know whether or not there was any kind of precognition there, but nevertheless, I had felt like the timing was right to do a show on Bermuda Triangle missing, these vial vortices and all the phenomena of the missing aircraft and missing ships. So I wanted to touch on that, and it just so happened that I was going to release that show, and then the Malaysian airline came up missing, so I wound up having to re-record the show with adding the material because I couldn't see the point of releasing that show and not discussing um, the missing Malaysian airline. So that hopefully that clarifies. I know I had some people that kind of call that into question. That it honestly happened that way. Really kind of a strange thing. So whatever the case may be there, nonetheless, here we are a week later, and we still haven't found the plane. Now, it appears that perhaps maybe there is some of this debris floating in the South Indian Ocean. Um, Unfortunately, weather conditions have made it difficult to get there. It's in a very remote location. When with the currents there, it's hard to say that if it will ever, if in fact the plane did go down there, we may never recover anything from that flight. Um, I know there's been some certain questions about the pilots, and unfortunately, it would seem to be that this is one of those situations where this could very well end up always being a bit of a mystery. We may be able to garner some information, but it doesn't seem at this point like we're going to be able to get the whole story unless we can find that wreckage. If we can't find the wreckage, then it's just a guess. So we have at this point we don't really have anything more to go on unless something changes, unless new evidence comes to light, unless we do manage to recover the black box. I don't know. At this point, I'm not hopeful that we'll be able to recover any kind of debris from this flight, if in fact did go down. Um, Making things more difficult, of course, there's a lot of diplomatic issues here because uh, governments are not willing to let other governments know what type of technology they're using to spy. There's a whole lot of very careful political uh, gesturing going on here. We have enough of that occurring in the Crimea right now, but it's happening in this unfortunately in this search and recovery effort here as well. So once again, beginning to wonder, you know, when we're looking at what type of power these governments have, what type of capabilities they have technologically speaking, um, it's kind of scary. And that leads us into the topic that I had planned for today. Um, and this is a topic in a title that some people are going to be familiar with, others not so much. It's not necessarily the most common term, but it's called transhumanism. also sometimes referred to as post-humanism. Now, to give you a little bit of clarification, give you a little bit of idea for those who are unfamiliar with the term, what these transhumanism and posthumanism is. Essentially, this is a movement that started with the goal of transforming humans by developing and making technology that can enhance humans physically and mentally. Okay, the idea of, in some respects, merging us with technology. Now, this idea um, is a fairly old one in some respects. I mean, some of these ideas in the movement go back as far as the 1920s. However, it really began to take root in the 1960s with the idea of futurology and futures and people who study and try to predict what kind of trends and what things are going to happen, what futurists do in terms of trying to decide, what is the future going to hold. A little different than psychics, okay? Psychics that use their abilities in other ways. Futurists work to analyze a given situation and then try to, based on past trends, based on current trends, and try to put together a picture of what the future may look like if these choices are made, or what it may look like if these choices are made. But the transhumanist and posthumanism ideas are really locked into, in many ways, the studies of the future. Now, the movement is very heavily influenced by science fiction. You can look through much of the science fiction produced in the 1960s, and of course, even in the earlier in literature, works of literature. But look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, and of course, a number of films and TV shows since then. Um, Reflect that. I mean, you can look right now at TV shows, Almost Human, that's out there. Revolution has elements of transhumanism, talking about nanotechnology, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Um, uh, there's also a number of movies. Most recently, that just came out right around the holiday season was Her, where the lead character, the lead male, wound up developing feelings in a relationship with artificial intelligence. Um, and for many of us, we hear that and it's like, what? What? But there are others who believe that that's a possible direction that we're going. And there's another movie that's coming out here. I think it's in the United States, it's coming out April 14th. I'm not sure what the international release dates are, but this is an intriguing one, and one that certainly can shed some light onto some of the possible negatives of this kind of movement. And this movie is called Transcendence. I believe it's starring Johnny Depp. Um, this, from what I've seen in some of the previews, sort of highlights the dark side of what transhumanism could be, and kind of opens up some of the questions that we're going to discuss today, because there are many who are familiar with this movement who say this is part of the New World Order, that this is the coming of the apocalypse, that it's about the mark of the beast, that there's a number of um, very scary connotations to this, and I'll get all into that shortly. But the thing I do want to emphasize is that when you look at most of the literature, okay, the idea is that the technology development could be used to improve both the quality and duration of our lives. It's the idea of creating ways to make man better, to improve us. Okay, sort of for those who are familiar, some of the older listeners, the $6 Million Man, the idea of rebuilding us, creating us into something better than what we are as just basic human beings. The idea of modifying us and making us faster, stronger, smarter, all these things to improve what we already are, make it better. Now, there are a number of technologies that are already transhumanist that we currently use. You talk to someone with cochlear implants for the deaf. I believe there's retinal implants. I also know that there's there's about approximately 10,000 people in the world that actually have a microchip planted inside of their brains, and it's used most often in certain medical scenarios. However, there's also other potential issues with that as we progress, and I'll get into. Um, but we already carry much of this kind of idea. The roots have already been planted. You look at pacemakers. For those who require assistance with keeping a regular heartbeat, pacemakers are another prime example of a piece of technology that has been planted inside of us to make us better. There's a number of people out there in the world who already have the roots of this technology within them. Now, some of this work in this kind of movement has been popularized as of late. Um, Particularly Raymond Kurzweil, um, who wrote "The Singularity is Near" in 2005. That is sort of become I don't know a good term for it, but for those who really adhere to it, that's sort of the pinnacle of the movement. Okay, that's the idea that humans will transcend biology, that we will become one with technology, that technology will be part of us and we'll be part of it, that we will merge. Okay, now for some people, that's an exciting possibility. The idea of taking on being able to do more than we are. Some people are really excited about that. And yet, on the other hand, there are others who look at this and think, well, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for mankind? There are those who believe this is part of the New World Order. This is a way of eliminating mankind. This is a way of altering who we are. Okay, this is a way of gaining further control of human beings. And it seems that there may be some reason for some concern there. But nevertheless, some of these ideas are still highly popularized. Michio Kaku, who I've referenced before in this show, who has sort of become this lead TV physicist, so to speak, who's on all the Science Channel stuff and all these different programs related to physics and things of that nature. But he's also very outspoken on what he believes is the vision of the future, and certainly some of these elements are there in it. So, what are some of the possibilities that exist in this type of society? For those who are advocates of the transhumanist movement in the post-human world, they argue that there is so much to benefit from here. Okay, that there's a potential for the growth of replacement organs, right? That we could, in this movement, that we could work towards being able to grow organs, and that we'll be able to have devices that will be able to enter our bodies to both repair and regenerate human tissue. Okay, the implications for some of this technology, such as nanotechnology, um, where these little particles are essentially injected into our bodies and go out and seek out and attack, and for some instance, cancer, that it could eliminate cancer. That also could, there's also the possibility in terms of regenerating human tissue. Of course, what this could mean for heart disease, people with heart issues, and of course, brain disorders, which, of course, I've already mentioned. There are already people who are getting some of this treatment already. So there's also the not just the health perspective, but also the knowledge perspective. By being plugged into intelligence and artificial intelligence, we would be able to have instant access to knowledge. We wouldn't even require the time to do a Google search. Okay. And to make things more interesting, Raymond Kurzweil, who I had mentioned earlier, the author of The Singularity is Near, he was recently appointed the head of engineering at Google. He has been given Google's resources to go above and beyond. For instance, he thinks Google Glass is almost primitive. He believes that it falls short of any kind of real efforts that we really need to be focusing on. His goal is to be able to merge human and artificial intelligence. to eliminate any kind of gap there at all. He wants artificial intelligence to understand human language, to understand slang, to understand human emotion. These are the goals. And he's been given Google's immense wealth to work on these things. Okay. Life in this type of world would require little to no manual labor. Everything would be done. The movement calls for the creation of self-replicating robots. Okay, robots that could build other robots, and those robots build other robots, and so on and so forth, and robots that build other things, and it becomes very much, for those of you who are familiar with Terminator, it becomes very much a potential Skynet kind of scenario, right? A worst case scenario would be that the machines become self-aware, which is the goal of many people in the movement, right? But what if they decide they want to overthrow their masters? Well, that's, for those who are critical of the movement, that's the scary thought. Okay, humans would merge with technology, become healthier, become stronger, become smarter, and live significantly longer lives. The goal, ultimately, for many transhumanists and posthumanists, is eternal life. Okay, um, the idea that we don't necessarily have to perish in the mortal form. Now, as I mentioned before, there are others who hear all these things and argue that, whoa, wait a minute here. You know, what you're talking about is very big brother potential here, very new world order, very even mark of the beast. For those who are not so familiar with that, but it's the idea that's been suggested in the book of Revelation in the Bible, the Christian Bible, that that for to be able to operate in the end times, that all would require some sort of mark to be able to purchase goods and to be able to do to become part of the economy. We would have to carry the mark of the beast to show that we were a follower and that we were allowed to partake in the world. Now, they point to a number of different things here. Of course, this has a potential for a huge Big Brother type of situation, right? Where if we're merged with technology, think about things as they are now. We already have found out that the NSA in the United States tracks everything. Of course, they track international and national. We're constantly surveilled in phone usage, internet usage, our text messages. We're under surveillance. It's a surveillance state at this point. So those who are critical say, look, it's only going to get worse because they're going to literally know the possibility of being merged with technology, okay, would be that there'd be no hiding anything. There's no real sense of privacy. Everything is out there for everybody. We'll know where everybody is at all times. And there's even the chance that we could know what everyone was thinking at all times, right? If our, for instance, transhumanists look towards the possibility of being able to literally, have computer technology inside our brains, that if we're connected to a world wide web, much as we are now, a mere thought could get projected out into the world wide web. It would become a telepathy, so to speak, right? That we could just communicate by thinking. Words and vocalization would no longer be necessary. Because if we're plugged in that way, everybody would know. So that's a little scary, I think, for a lot of people, even to me a little bit. And I tend to be very open to technology, but nevertheless, that's a little off-putting to think that every single thing that we think of could be known. No sense of privacy whatsoever. Now, it's also the concern that, well, this technology that we're putting or merging ourselves with, or putting in our body, who controls this technology? Would we have control of it? Would the artificial intelligence have control over it? Would a government body have control over it? Who's best to control this technology? Well, for those who are proponents of believe that, well, we, the individual, would be able to control our own technology. There are others who argue, well, not so fast. What if, number one, the machines do take over? and were to be the ones in control. That's that's a concern. And they also argue, well, okay, do what if the government is the ones that are in control of this? What if the government is the one who, the entity that controls the system, right? And for that matter, maybe they'll control who gets access and who doesn't, because that's another issue, right? What if those who want to partake, for instance, who want to be part of the system, have terminal illnesses that want to be able to access this technology to get better, to receive cures, to have better health, to live longer? What if it is only for those who can afford it, the truly wealthy? Well, many argue that this is already the case, right? Where approximately about 85 people in the world hold almost 50% of the world's wealth. Maybe they already do have access to this technology. Maybe they're already implementing it and we just don't know. That represents another possibility as well. Nevertheless, for those who want or need to have a replacement organ grown for them, right? And because they're not of a particular family or a particular social class, that they're kept from it. That's a concern. And there are those who argue in the movement, well, that's why it's important that democracy would need to continue to be strengthened, and it could be strengthened through this movement. And that's certainly the possibility. It could be. Uh, I would hope, in the very least, that if this kind of movement existed, that everybody would be more involved in the government in decision making. If something like this were to occur, but nevertheless, if it weren't, and we're looking at a totalitarian possibility here, a totalitarian state with immense control and immense power, and an ability to dictate everything that human beings do. It's a very scary thought. You know, only the best people, quote unquote, would be able to have access to the technology. Even if those who were not so wealthy wanted it, perhaps they wouldn't be able to access it. So that's another criticism by those who are opponents of this movement. Another concern, another issue that we have to think about when we merge with technology in this way, in the ways that are suggested. Okay, who is in control of the technology? Now, as I mentioned before, in the bigger picture, right? But we're talking about the individual, okay? Inside the individual person, who would control the technology? Would the artificial intelligence control the body? Or would the body and the brain control the artificial intelligence? And I think that is perhaps the most important point in terms of concern, is who would be in control, okay? Who would be the ones in power? Who controls the individual? You know, that to me is perhaps the scariest thought. Say you decide, the human part of you, to do something that is, say, a little more um, illogical. It's something that you would deem as valuable to do, right? A thrill-seeking type of adventure. For those who are adrenaline junkies, okay, who want to skydive, who want to bungee jump, okay, say that's an impulse that doesn't maybe necessarily always make the most logical sense, but it's something that you enjoy doing. You enjoy the thrill, you enjoy the rush, right? Now, what if the artificial intelligence inside of you makes an assessment that that is not a safe thing to do, that the potential of death is great, and that you should not participate in thrill seeking activities? As a result, this artificial intelligence, what if it takes over and prevents you from doing the activity? Could it? Well, if you're merged with it, if you have a computer chip inside of you with its own intelligence, perhaps it could. Perhaps it could, right? That's kind of a scary thought. What is it that makes us human? We at that point we have to fundamentally truly try to question humanity. Is humanity just a biological entity, or are we something more? If we are truly something more than a biological entity, if there is something that survives beyond this physical existence, then how do we reconcile that with the technology? Well, there are some theologians out there who do not see this as a competing issue. As a matter of fact, that they think that it's really an extension of just in certain cases the technology that we already have in place. And I would agree that in many cases it certainly is. There are many who don't see this as a competing vision, that argue that, well, God has given us free will and has thus given us the ability to make these decisions on our own. And that as long as we do God's work, then we're not violating God's laws. Now, there are those who argue that, well, the biological manipulation, maybe perhaps designer babies, things of that nature, well, is that tinkering a little bit? Growing humans, cloning humans, is that tinkering a bit? Well, there are a lot of ethical concerns there. Does a cloned human, is it really a human? Well, it might be. If It just depends on your definition. Does a cloned human have a soul? If humans have souls, do cloned humans have souls? Well, that's another question. We don't know. Many don't know. We don't have a scientific proof that we have souls. There are many of us who believe that we do, many of us who believe that we've gone on, and those who've had experiences in the afterlife, and those who have witnessed other ghostly type entities that perhaps certainly argue that we do have something more beyond this. So if that's the case, we have a number of ethical questions with regards to cloning and what really makes us human. What is it that separates us from just being a piece of meat? Is it something more? Well, that's a question that we would eventually certainly have to address here. I mean, these are not simple questions, not at all. Now, there's a number of potentials there, potential for good things, you know, and so it makes it difficult to look at this and for someone, at least in my opinion, to look at this and deride the entire thing as being um, something of the New World Order. Let me be clear. I think that it is certainly possible, as with any technology, that if in the wrong hands, with the wrong individuals, bad things can be done with it. I think that we need to be very careful about complete, entire human cloning. I'm not opposed to organ cloning, but I think that when we start looking at cloning entire human beings, I think that that's an issue that we really need to look into. I'm not saying that I'm adamantly opposed, nor am I saying I'm in favor of it. But I think that we have to do a lot of collective discussion about whether or not we really want to start cloning individuals. We have enough issues of feeding and housing and life, quality of life now. Adding clones to this mix, I don't see that being feasible. However, the idea of being able to clone organs, to be able to have a replacement organ if you need it in the future, I think that'd be fantastic. Now, I have to be honest with you, a year ago, thinking about some of these technologies, the ability, and some of the downfalls that come associated with them, right? The possibility of being able to be tracked and traced and have Big Brother know everything that you're doing. And a year ago, I would have been almost vehemently opposed to much of these ideas. But after having gone through this bout with cancer, having gone through the several surgeries, And now that I'm in the stage of survivorship where I'm hoping every day that it doesn't return. I'm hoping that I get to live a long enough life to see my kids, to see grandchildren, to be able to live to be an old man. The fear that I won't be able to have that happen because maybe it comes back and it's worse, or you know, those fears make me think twice about this. If someone were to approach me and say, we have developed nanotechnology that can safely kill any cancerous cell in your body, you will never have cancer ever again. But you could be traced, you could be tracked, and we'd be able to know where you are. You would lose a sense of privacy. I don't know that I think I would almost be willing to sacrifice that. And a year ago I would never have dreamed of ever saying anything like that. Never. Never. It's easy to believe that you would make this question because you value your rights, you value your freedoms, but this is the question that we've dealt with in the post 9/11 era. How much individual rights are willing to sacrifice for a sense of safety and security? And in that respect, we sacrificed a bit of it. And looking at myself individually, am I willing to sacrifice a bit of my own privacy to know that perhaps I would not die of cancer? I have to tell you, I don't know that I could say no. And it's easy for someone to judge and say, "Oh, there's no way I would ever do it." But until you've been in a situation where your life is in danger, or there's a chance that you may have a terminal illness, or that you do have a potentially terminal illness, it makes you reconsider things. For those cancer survivors out there who, maybe catch cancer early and manage to avoid it spreading, or at least at the moment it hasn't spread, or you think you caught it all. It's so microscopic you just don't know. And the possibility of being able to have a technology implanted inside of you to prevent something like that from happening ever again, for those who have gone through the experience, I don't know that it's an easy answer. And I think it's an individual one. I think it's something that every person, if ever given that opportunity, should have to answer for themselves. What I don't believe is that anyone should be forced into doing and participating in this technology, right? If we start getting forced and coerced, then we can start looking at a real situation. We're looking at a new world order type of situation where we're being controlled and everything's being tracked and everything's being monitored. But I think that there's too much potential for greatness in this technology to just completely dismiss it out of hand as being something horrible and something evil. So we have seen, certainly in the 21st and the 20th centuries, technology can do amazing things, but it can also do terrible things. And that is the struggle that we are going to have going forward. This isn't going to go away. These questions aren't going to go away. They're only going to continue. And at some point, collectively, as a society, a global society, we'll have to make decisions about what we're okay with, what we're not okay with, what we're willing to sacrifice, what we're not willing to sacrifice. And I don't believe that anybody should be coerced into taking some mark, being part of the technology to be able to purchase anything. Or, that's when we're talking about a very different set of circumstances. Okay, then it's a different story. But the health potential is there. Now, I have to be honest, I'm a little uncertain about having a chip planted into me and having all this instant access and being part of a connected web. That's a little scary too. Um, and then another issue another concern, as for those of you who've seen the trailer for Transcendence, the other possibility is that when we die, our consciousness, our brains, could be uploaded into an artificial intelligence. It would be a way for our thoughts, and our um, beliefs and our brains to live on in a computer. You know, is that fair? I mean, is that something that we want? Well, perhaps our loved ones would like that, be able to communicate with our consciousness again. But would it really be us? I don't know, and I don't know that those questions are easy to answer. But this is a conversation that we're going to have to start having. Now, do I believe that all this technology is going to be available in the next 5 to 10 years? Probably not. 20, 30, 40 years? Well, that's a little different story. I certainly think in the generations to come that there are going to be issues that are going to have to be addressed. It's going to have to happen, and we have to do it sooner rather than later. And we have to decide at what point we're okay with technology taking away some of our other rights in exchange for health, super intelligence, super strength, super capabilities beyond anything we could have ever dreamed. The technology is already being worked on. It's already out there. It just hasn't been mass produced yet. And if there's anything that we've seen technology do, is that technology is moving at an exponentially fast rate. Computers are within 6 months are almost outdated in 6 months' time now. Certainly by a year. You could almost every year buy a new piece of technology because the previous year, well, it's slower, it doesn't have enough memory, it doesn't have all the capabilities, it doesn't have all the enhancements. This is the direction technology is heading. That much is clear. The question is, how much of it do we want to actually be a part of us physically and mentally? And those are questions that we're going to ask. Because if things go bad, then we are looking at a new world order scenario. We are looking at a very potentially troubling world. However, if we maintain some sense of control and some sense of order in this, and continue to assert a degree of our humanity, we can adopt much of this technology and still gain the benefits without having all of the negatives that could come along with it. So, well, that's what I have for everybody this week. I hope you enjoyed a little different type of episode, but I really felt like it's coming up. It seems to be making news now, and I feel like talking about some of these issues are important. So I hope that everybody enjoyed it. I'd love to get your feedback on the episode. Let me know what you think. Um, and like I said, I'll probably move into something a little more along the lines of what I've been doing, but I definitely wanted to kind of touch into this topic and into this because this could go one of two ways, and it's up to us to decide which way we want it to go. So, once again, I want to thank everybody for listening and supporting the show. I appreciate it, and have a great week, and I'll be back with you again next Friday.